Welcome to the deep dive. So, you're trying to figure out how to get the Indian government to help fund your studies abroad. Well, you're looking at something that's known for being pretty competitive.
And administratively complex,
Hold on,
definitely.
it's a real maze.
Hmm.
Our mission today is basically to cut through that complexity. We want to give you some actionable knowledge and fast.
Right.
We're digging into the sources to understand not just which scholarships are out there, but also, why so many people who actually qualify still seem to struggle to get that final bit of funding confirmed.
Yeah, that's a really crucial distinction we need to make right at the start. When people say Indian government scholarships for studying abroad, it's rarely this one big pot of money for every single student.
Right.
Our sources show the government really plays like three main roles here. First, you've got erect schemes. These are really designed for historical equity, helping specific marginalized groups. Those are the most targeted ones. Second, they kind of act as coordinators. They promote and help streamline access to scholarships that are actually offered by other countries or, foreign universities, friendly partners.
Partner countries, right.
And third, which is important but maybe less consistent, you have state-level programs for overseas education. These can vary quite a bit.
Exactly. And that administrative reality you mentioned, that gap between getting selected and actually seeing the funds released, that seems to be the real crunch point.
It really can be.
That bureaucracy can make or break your chances. So let's start with the government's main tool here, the Social Justice Flagship Program.
Okay, so that would be the National Overseas Scholarship, usually called NOS. This is the central government's biggest, most direct effort to, address some of those historical gaps in educational access.
And who exactly is it for?
The target groups are very specific. It's for students from scheduled castes, that's SC, denotified tribes, DN or SNT, also landless agricultural workers, and people from traditional artisan families.
Okay, specific groups.
And there are key requirements, too. You need to be below a certain family income level, obviously have good grades, and you must be aiming for a master's or a PhD degree abroad, not undergrad.
And the coverage, it sounds pretty good on paper. Tuition, living costs, travel.
It does, yeah. Tuition, maintenance allowance, travel, some other allowances are included. And there's a really important equity detail. 30% of the slots are reserved specifically for women applicants from those same categories.
30% for women. Okay, that's significant.
That's the potential, definitely. But here's the immediate reality check we have to mention. The scheme is actually tiny. It's very focused, yes, but extremely limited in scale.
How limited are we talking?
There are only 125 slots available each year for the entire country.
Wait, 125? Seriously?
Yes, and out of those, 115 are specifically for SC candidates. Then you have 6 for the denotified tribes and just 4 for the landless agricultural workers and traditional artisans combined.
Wow. Okay, 125 slots annually. Given the size of the populations this is meant to help, that number feels, it feels incredibly small. It sounds less like a national strategy and more like a very, very competitive award program.
That's a good way to put it. It absolutely signals intense competition, which is why we say the philosophy behind N is really about historical equity and upliftment for a select few each year.
Right.
The scarcity means your application, your proof of need, your academic merit, how you articulate your community connection. It all has to be absolutely spot on.
And you mentioned something else. The money doesn't go straight to the student.
Correct. The funds are usually sent through the Indian diplomatic missions abroad or sometimes directly to the foreign universities.
Yeah.
That adds another layer of administration, another potential delay point.
Okay, so that's NS, high stakes, limited slots, focused on equity. Let's shift gears to the second category you mentioned. The government-promoted opportunities. These sound like they operate differently.
Completely different philosophy, really. These are less about historical equity and more about promoting international excellence, identifying future leaders, that kind of thing. The classic example here is the Fulbright and Nehru Fellowships.
Ah, Fulbright. That's a big name.
Exactly. It's run by the U.S. India Educational Foundation, or USIF, but it's widely seen as a government-endorsed pathway. It's for Indian students, yes, but also teachers, researchers, academics looking to go to the U.S. for study or research.
And what does Fulbright cover? Is it similar to NOS?
It's comprehensive, covers tuition, a stipend for living expenses, airfare, health insurance, the usual package. But the eligibility is different. You still need a decent academic record. Minimum 55% at the undergraduate level is typical. But the real emphasis is much more on your work experience, the strength of your research proposal if you're doing research, and demonstrating leadership potential. Recommendations are huge here too. It's definitely a shift from a primarily need-based application like NOS to one that's heavily merit and potential-based.
Makes sense. So NOS for equity, Fulbright for kind of merit and leadership. Are there others in this promoted category?
Well, we should briefly mention the ICCR scholarships. That's the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. Their main focus is actually bringing foreign students to India for cultural exchange.
Oh, right. The other direction.
Mostly, yes. But they do sometimes facilitate certain programs for Indians going abroad, often tied to specific cultural agreements. And then, of course, you have the state-level efforts.
Which you said can be quite variable.
Highly variable. It really depends on the state's budget for that year, their policy priorities. Our sources mention examples like Telangana's Chief Minister's Overseas Scholarship, which is specifically for minorities, or schemes in other states for backward classes or economically backward classes like the one named Mahatma Jyotiba Phule Overseas Vidyanidhi.
So the key takeaway for listeners there is
Check your specific state government's education department website very carefully and regularly. These programs can appear, disappear, or change eligibility rules from one year to the next based on funding and politics. You absolutely have to verify the current status for your state.
Okay, that clarifies the main types of schemes. The equity-focused NS, the excellence-focused ones like Fulbright, and the localized state ones. So now let's get practical. You've found a scheme that seems right for you. How do you actually maximize your chances, knowing how tough the competition is?
Right, the how-to. Well, the basics are the foundation, obviously. You have to meet the specific community or caste requirements for the equity schemes like Mattis.
Check.
You need to meet the academic threshold, often that 55% minimum, though higher is always better.
Naturally.
And if the scheme requires it, like Fulbright often does, you need relevant work or research experience. But here's a really critical strategic point that catches people out. For many of the really good international scholarships, and even some of these government-promoted ones, you often need to have an unconditional offer letter from your chosen foreign university before you can even submit your scholarship application.
So you need to get into the university first?
In many cases, yes, which means you have to be working on both things at the same time, applying to universities and applying for the scholarships. It's a parallel process.
That adds another layer of complexity and timing pressure, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It means you need to start the whole process very early.
Which brings us to the paperwork. It's not just about ticking boxes, is it? You're saying it needs to be more like a strategic pitch.
Exactly. Your transcripts matter, of course, but the statement of purpose, or your research proposal if it's for a PhD, that document is absolutely critical. You can't just say, I want to study X.
What should you do instead?
You need to strategically frame it. Show how your specific study plan, whether it's in, say, environmental engineering or public policy or whatever, directly aligns with India's current challenges or future development goals. You need to make the case for why funding you is actually an investment in the country's future.
Making it about national benefit, not just personal ambition?
Precisely. And alongside that, the quality of your references matters immensely. You need strong, detailed letters of recommendation from people who genuinely know your work and potential.
Right.
And then the basics. Proof of income, community certificates if needed for NOS, identity documents, your language test scores like TOEFL or IELTS. Those are usually non-negotiable minimums.
And the resume. You mentioned leadership earlier.
Yes, your resume or CV shouldn't just list jobs or education. The successful applicants highlighted in our sources often showcase leadership roles, significant extracurricular activities, volunteer work, things that prove you can apply your knowledge and make an impact beyond just getting good grades.
It helps to look at examples, maybe. Our source material mentioned a few people. Praveen, Sneha.
Yeah, those stories are illustrative. Praveen, for instance, was academically brilliant, but apparently struggled initially with writing a compelling statement of purpose for his Commonwealth Scholarship application. He needed help learning how to articulate not just his past achievements, but his future potential contribution.
So it wasn't just grades.
No. And Sneha, applying for a master's in public health under, I think it was AIRS, her application really stood out because she very clearly connected her study goals to specific health challenges in rural India. She explicitly aligned her personal ambition with the scheme's social justice mandate.
And the common thread for people like them.
The sources suggest two things consistently. One, they started the application process super early, sometimes up to a full year in advance. Two, they actively networked and they reach out to past scholars, mentors, people who could guide them through the process. They didn't just rely on websites.
Okay, start early, network, and frame your application strategically. Got it. But now we need to dive into the tough part, the reality check. This is where, as you said, the knowledge gets really specific and maybe a bit sobering for applicants.
This.
We talked about the small scale of NOS, just 125 slots. But you're saying even getting selected isn't the end of the story because of administrative problems.
Yeah, this is what the data seems to point towards, what we might call the funding paradox. It's quite stark. For the 2025-26 cycle, the NOS scheme actually received its largest budget allocation ever, a huge year 130 crore.
130 crore rupees. Okay, that sounds like plenty of money for 125 students.
You would think so, wouldn't you? You'd assume that means smooth sailing once you're selected. But reports indicate severe problems with actually using that money. There were significant delays and, frankly, underutilization.
What kind of problems? What happened?
Well, reports cited in our sources state that out of 106 candidates who were actually selected for NOS in that 2025-26 period, only 40 ended up receiving their provisional award letters in a timely manner.
Only 40 out of 106. What happened to the others and the money?
Apparently, the remaining funds were effectively frozen or just unavailable when needed. The money was allocated in the budget, but reports suggest it couldn't be accessed or dispersed properly by the ministry responsible.
So the money was there on paper, but couldn't get to the students who'd been selected.
That seems to be the issue highlighted. And it points to a much bigger systemic problem that parliamentary reports have also flagged.
Which is?
Large amounts of unspent money sitting in various government welfare accounts across the board. We're talking huge sums, sometimes between 2,700 crore and over 5,000 crore in total across different schemes.
Billions of rupees. Unspent.
Billions, yes. Money that's been budgeted and allocated for welfare programs, but it fails to actually reach the people it's intended for because of, well, internal bureaucratic processes, administrative blockages, systemic inertia.
Wow. So if you're one of those 125 selected NOS students, the real battle isn't necessarily proving your need anymore. It's fighting the internal system to get the allocated funds released.
That's often the practical reality, unfortunately. The bottleneck isn't always the lack of funds in the government's account. It's the process of getting it out.
And that must have direct, painful consequences for the students caught in this.
Absolutely. Students frequently report practical issues.
Yeah.
One is that the actual scholarship amounts sometimes don't keep up with the rising costs of tuition and living abroad. Inflation erodes the value.
Right, costs go up every year.
Then there's just the sheer administrative friction. Documents taking forever to get verified, government application portals having glitches or being down, eligibility rules being unclear or interpreted inconsistently. It creates huge uncertainty.
And I imagine this is even harder for students who aren't in major cities.
Definitely. For students in rural or remote areas, just getting access to the correct information in a timely way can be a major hurdle. Unequal awareness and access compound the bureaucratic difficulties.
So let's make this really concrete for someone listening. You could do everything right, get amazing grades, secure that offer from a top foreign university, even get selected for one of these highly competitive NOS slots.
Yes.
And you could still miss your university's enrollment deadline or your visa appointment because the official award letter from the government is stuck somewhere in the system for months.
That is exactly the risk. The administrative delay itself becomes the biggest barrier, imposing huge financial stress and uncertainty right when you need things to be smooth. The system itself can inadvertently undermine the opportunity it's trying to provide.
Okay, that's a stark reality check. So given that just relying on these central government funds seems, frankly, pretty risky, what's the strategic advice? What should you actually do?
The clear takeaway is that you need what we might call a dual approach, or maybe even a multi-pronged approach.
Meaning
Meaning you should absolutely apply for the Indian government programs if you're eligible. NOS state schemes treat them as a potential source of base funding. But you absolutely cannot put all your eggs in that one basket.
So apply for those, but also
Simultaneously, you must aggressively pursue other fully funded global scholarship opportunities. Look hard at things like the Commonwealth Scholarships, Chevening Scholarships in the UK, Erasmus Mundus in Europe.
the big international ones.
Yes, and also, crucially, apply for any scholarships or grants offered directly by the foreign university you're applying to. Almost all major universities have their own funding pots. You need to diversify your funding applications as much as possible to mitigate the risk of delays or non-funding from any single source.
Spread the risk, essentially.
Exactly.
Now, These problems with delays and unspent funds, surely people are aware. Are experts or committees suggesting solutions?
Oh, yes. This issue is well documented, and there are clear calls for reform coming from experts and even parliamentary committees that oversee these ministries.
What are they recommending?
Several key things. One, a critical there is to adjust the scholarship amounts regularly to account for inflation and the rising cost of international education. The value needs to keep pace.
Makes sense. What else?
They're stressing the need to simplify the application and verification processes, using digital tools more effectively to create transparency and speed things up. Think better online portals, faster document checks,
Less paper pushing.
hopefully. And crucially, they talk about improving coordination between different government agencies, central ministries, state departments, maybe even embassies abroad to prevent these funding release delays that seem to happen when responsibility is split or unclear.
Streamlining the bureaucracy itself.
That's the goal. And some experts also advocate for more non-monetary support. Things like dedicated help navigating the visa application process or pre-departure orientation sessions. Support to ensure that once you get the award, you can actually use it effectively.
It's not just about the money, it's the whole pathway.
Right. And this ties back to the bigger picture justification for these schemes in the first place. There's a quote from Dr. Rukmini Banerjee that captures this well. She argues, essentially, that when the government invests in sending talented students abroad, it's not brain drain.
Right, the old argument.
She calls it brain circulation. The idea is that the knowledge, the skills, the networks these scholars bring back eventually benefit institutions and industries back home in India. So the investment has a multiplier effect, a significant national value.
That's a powerful argument for making the system work better.
It really is.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the individual applicant listening right now. What's the final tactical advice we can give them?
Apply widely: government schemes, international scholarships, university grants. Diversify. Second, watch deadlines like a hawk. For everything, university applications, scholarship applications, document submissions. Start early.
Be meticulously organized.
Absolutely. And third, if you do get selected for a government scheme and then face unacceptable delays in getting your award letter or funds, remember you have rights and tools. Use public feedback channels. Escalate the issue. And don't be afraid to use the Right to Information Act, RTI, to demand clarity on processes and timelines. You may need to actively push the system to work for you.
Hold the system accountable, basically.
You may have to.
Okay. So wrapping this up, our deep dive shows that Indian government scholarships, especially NLS, hold out this incredible promise, this potential for equity and opportunity.
But success demands navigating this really significant administrative friction. You have huge potential impact, but tiny scale in schemes like NOS. We have large budgets allocated, but also these alarming reports of unspent welfare funds. It highlights this gap between the policy intention and the on-the-ground implementation.
Right, the gap is key.
And the future effectiveness of these programs, it seems, won't just depend on getting bigger budgets. We saw the NOS budget was already increased significantly. It really depends on achieving, quote, better management.
Better management.
Better management that ensures the money actually flows, that it translates into real opportunity for the students who need it most, especially the most marginalized. That's what builds trust, not just bigger budget lines.
Okay, so that leads to our final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah, think about this. We've established that internal delays and those unspent funds seem to be the biggest practical threat to these scholarship programs actually working as intended. If you were suddenly put in charge of reforming just one part of this process, knowing that, what specific bureaucratic hurdle? Maybe it's document verification, maybe it's fund disbursement, maybe communication. What single piece of the administrative machinery would you target first to make the biggest difference? Where would you start?